Hi, I'm MrMostDaysOff. You might remember me from such podcasts as the 50th Podcast Celebration Show and the Michael Price interview. I've brought a friend along today to talk to you about an exciting new product.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Richie the WizKid.
Miles, did you know that most people have no idea how to get a Best Darn Diddly t-shirt?
You can get a t-shirt with a podcast logo on it?
Well, if you go to tpublic.com/bestdarndiddly, you'll find not only shirts, but also Best Darn Diddly hoodies, posters, mugs, and even phone and laptop cases. It's like they'll put their name on anything.
Help support the Best Darn Diddly Review Show by purchasing any of the crap we put our name on at tpublic.com/bestdarndiddly.
Bye, everybody.
G'day, mates. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Best Darn Diddly is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as MrMostDaysOff, and of course, joining me as always today will be Richie the WizKid, and returning from last week, Paul from the Countdown Movie and Television Podcast will be joining us all the way from Perth, Australia to discuss the conclusion of Bart Vs Australia. Last week, we left off after learning about Paul's connection with The Simpsons early in life as a student. We then went on to discuss the first act of Bart vs. Australia, where Bart, in an attempt to learn about the water going around in the toilet bowl the correct American way, ends up calling Collect Australia for a giant bill of $900 dues. The Simpsons are on their way to Australia to resolve these issues, and we are going to dive right back into Act 2 and the conclusion of Bart vs. Australia. We come back for our second act with Marge very concerned with what's going on. Bart, did you trick an Australian boy into accepting a $900 collect call?
Yes.
And we cut to Homer, who's staring at the globe intently. There it is. Australia. I'll be damned. And look, you are gay.
Easily entertained Homer.
Joke from the 90s.
Oh my god, how many times, in the early days of the internet, this was one of the earliest, MP3s that went around for the longest time that people would send in, instant messages. So, you'd wait, 15 minutes and the audio file would finally download, and then it would literally just be Homer saying, "You are gay," and laughing. And of course, if it wasn't clear for those who haven't seen this or seen this in a while, Homer's looking at the country of Uruguay.
I kind of thought you were going to fuck that up and actually say you are gay.
You are gay. That's how it's pronounced. Yes, absolutely. We see a very official vehicle. It's a limo that pulls up in front of the Simpsons home, and we see a man arrive at the front door. It is one Evan Conover with the U.S. State Department, and he introduces himself to Marge. And we get the amazing, his card, I love it, says it's Undersecretary for International Protocol, Brat and Punk Division. But we get the amazingly talented Phil Hartman, who is this Agent Conover.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Bart, your little escapade could not have come at a worse time. Americo-Australian relations are at an all-time low. As I'm sure you remember, in the late 1980s, the U.S. experienced a short-lived infatuation with Australian culture. For some bizarre reason, the Aussies thought this would be a permanent thing. Of course it wasn't. I love that you see a slideshow of things, and among other images, one of them is a shut-down theater on a street in Australia that says Yahoo Serious Festival.
Oh, God.
Which is a joke that is probably completely lost to time and even referenced in the director's commentary, which this episode debuted in February of 95. The director's commentary was actually done in February of 2005, almost exactly 10 years later. And even at that time, the commentary was like, yeah, this joke doesn't really make sense anymore because Yahoo is barely a thing.
Thank God.
Anyway, the Down Under fad fizzled and diplomatic climate turned absolutely frosty. This is where we cut to another interesting slide where we see a sight or a crosshair directly over it's Fidel Castro's forehead. But immediately this Conover guy is like, oops, let's pretend we didn't see this. And he actually removes the slide and eats it. This is, of course, referencing the conspiracy that the United States and this one actually has some legs to it for what it's worth. But there was a time where it's believed that we had a plan after the Cold War to assassinate Fidel Castro that never came to fruition.
Have to clean up our own messes, don't we?
Yeah, I said Cold War. I actually meant Bay of Pigs for what it's worth, but I'm not the history buff. You know that. I've probably fucked up enough of those facts as it is. It's fine. We're all going to pretend I didn't say that. I'm going to eat this. I'm going to eat this podcast recording real quick. So, Bart's childish taunting has agitated the Aussies further.
Oh, he'll agitate you. Oh, he sure will. What can we do for you?
Well, it's too late to merely pay back the money, but as a sign of good faith to our Australian friends, we'd like to imprison Bart for 5 years.
That's tough but fair. Boy, go with the man.
I love that. Homer's just like, yeah, 5 years seems like a good amount of time. Marge, though, isn't quite so keen, and she refuses to let her son go to jail over some silly tiff with Australia. They're going to have to find another way to have relations with them.
Another country to have relations with.
So, all right. We're not hearing a lot of support for prison. There is another option, which I love that they led with prison, and then they have this backup plan of they could drop the charges as long as Bart apologizes. Publicly, of course.
In Australia.
All Bart has to do is apologize, and we get a free trip to Australia?
Mm-hmm.
I love this next bit. One of my favorite lines, just because of how much I love Bart, and this is just represents him so well. Bart's like, I can handle that. I'm an expert at phony apologies.
Bart!
I'm sorry.
That's better. That sly look into the camera.
He's such a smooth criminal.
Oh, I don't see what you did there.
Fair. We see that the Simpsons are taking up the Australian government, or I guess it's the United States government. It's the relations between the two. They're working together to bring the Simpsons to Australia. They fly transhemispheric airlines, which I think is absolutely great. But then I think this is the strongest visual gag, or one of the strongest visual gags in The Simpsons, as we pan through just to cut to Australia. Instead of going around the world, we go straight through the earth. And at first we see some things you might expect, like just people in coffins, which I love. There's a man who's actually climbing under his coffin trying to escape. A few layers deeper, we see some dinosaurs that are also sitting in caskets of various sizes, which is great. But probably the absolute best is as we cut through, we see the god Vishnu is like controlling an operations board in the very center of the earth. So sorry, rest of the world. It was Vishnu. Vishnu is the correct god.
I want to point out that I think it's good that a few weeks ago that Marge got over her fear of flying, because this is a long-ass flight.
I listened to your episode about this and I was laughing the whole time because the longest flight in the world at that stage, I think, was LA to Sydney, and they went to Canberra, so there was an extra flight on top of that. So yes, 17. I've done that flight 15 hours, 15 and a half hours. It's not fun.
No, it's a rough flight. The only time I've ever been airsick was when I went to Australia, and it's just like after being on the airplane for however long and eating airplane food, it was like, nope, something's happening here. This is not great.
Then you had to use an airplane bathroom.
Yeah, and that's never
At the
fun.
end of 15 hours, do not, if you need to go early.
Yeah, for sure. Don't wait. It's going to happen.
And find the one with the bidet.
Exactly. That's only on the Australian planes. They don't do that in America. Not yet. I love the bit at the airport when Homer and the rest of the family arrives. Homer's like, all right, we left at 1:30 p.m. on Monday. What time is it now?
It's 6:45 a.m. next Wednesday. You may also be interested to know that it's summer here, not winter.
Homer had a sled, and he's so disappointed. He actually just throws it away. I have to say, I really connect with this joke because just having to schedule with Paul, trying to figure out, like, okay, when can we record? And him telling me what time it is, I was just like, no, that can't possibly be right. I'm still not 100% what day of the week it is for you currently, to be honest.
Well, can I jump in with a gag which you can absolutely cut out here? No problem at all. There's a friend of mine.
I love the confidence you bestow in how good this is going to be.
A friend of mine's a chemical engineer, and he moved to Texas, to Houston, to work. Oh, it must be good. Wow. It was just after the City Olympics, so a good 17 years ago. And so he was with other chemical engineers, like, educated people. And, they had him at the break room in the first week, and these other dudes with PhDs and doctors and the like were like, yeah, so what's Australia? And he was saying to them exactly that. Like, it's like, because it was July, I think it's winter in Australia. And they were like, what? A couple of them were like, legitimately like, what?
Mind blown.
And then one of the dudes with a PhD in chemical engineering says, is it also July in Australia?
He got his education in the States, brother. You got to understand. It's
Bovine University.
That's right. Shout out to Dr. Ralph Wiggum, or Professor Ralph Wiggum.
It's a lot of the people, like when I get home from my job working nights, I usually stay up for a few hours, and for a few years now I was playing video games for a few hours after work, and most of the people I was playing with were people from New Zealand, and I guess it was just the time of day because it was 4 to 6 in the morning here, and I think it was right before they were going to bed or something. I don't remember the time difference. I used to be really smart about that part, but
no, yes. New Zealand are a good 17 hours ahead of you guys, so that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wow. Fun stuff. So I do have to ask, do they actually speak English in Australia? Because according to the sign they see, Bart is not convinced they do.
Yes. We speak Australian slang English, mate. Cobber. Yeah.
So we see that they approach an advisory sign, foreign flora and fauna prohibited, and Bart is just like, what does this even say? But Lisa has to explain, you can't bring in outside plants and animals. So, of course, because it could upset the environmental balance. Bart realizes he's already in enough trouble with Australia, and he doesn't want to upset them further. So to be safe, he's going to leave his pet frog that he managed to get on the airplane through customs already and back into another country. But he'll just leave it in the airport fountain and pick her up on the way back through.
So Bart's the reason that Australia has an actual frog problem.
It seems to be that way, because immediately this frog escapes through the window, and it ends up hopping a ride with a kangaroo in its pouch. But I'm sure nothing bad will come from that.
Which is a reference, of course, to the Australian cane toad and the pest that it became / still is in the eastern states.
Yeah, I was reading about that while doing some research. Apparently, in like the 1930s, they were trying to cut down on what was it? It was insects that were eating the sugar cane there. Correct?
That's it. They brought in these toads to sort that out, and yeah, they did. And now they have destroyed just about everything in the ecosystem, as Lisa points out towards the end of the episode.
I think we might have it coming back our way when that koala problem just takes ravage on the states.
Well, the new episodes of Joe McHale's reality TV review show had a clip, and I think it was Joe McHale or John Oliver, but I'm pretty sure it was Joe McHale's show. And he actually played a clip of a guy running for office in Australia, and it was either in the 80s or 90s, and it literally showed him driving on the road, running over toads, and it was like part of his...
Yeah.
It was like whacking
supposed
day.
To give him approval, basically. And you can hear the pop when he's running over the toads.
Oh, it sounds
like,
crazy.
Oh my gosh.
It sounds completely wrong, and I'm not defending it because we don't have the problem here. That said, I live as far from that part in Australian terms. I live as far humanly away as that is, and yet we have had the first cane toads in the last 5 years hop into our part of the world. So they have literally gone across the entire width and length of Australia.
I've got a plan.
Wow.
We just need to figure out what eats cane toads, and then we'll import it back to Australia, and that'll
That's
at least
right, bullfrogs.
reset the problem.
Bullfrogs.
Or excuse me, yeah, bullfrogs. Yeah, there you go. That'll at least reset the problem back to the 1930s, and we can just do this every,
Start again.
Yeah, every 80 years or so. It'll be fine.
The gorillas and the sharks, I think, is the hierarchy.
You're just gonna get bigger,
the Skinner plan.
bigger and bigger
Velociraptors.
animals. Yeah.
We just need some velociraptors, and it will sort everything out.
And then you can get Chris Pratt to train them for you.
Oh, can we not go down that road?
Sorry, my fault. Back to the Simpsons.
Back to the Simpsons. We see the Simpsons arrive at the U.S. Embassy where there are military guards, and Homer is excited because he thinks it's one of those English guards who can't laugh or smile or anything until he gets punched in the face. No, sir! U.S. Marine Corps, sir! The Simpsons are actually put up in a really, really nice spot. I mean, it's a fancy place to stay, something they probably would never be able to afford on their own, except for they're the Simpsons, so they seem to always have money. But I love Homer is so excited and happy about this that he's decided, boy, next summer, can you commit some fraud in Orlando, Florida?
I'm way ahead of you, Dad.
Orlando!
Sorry. Don't get us off topic again.
No,
Miles.
I won't. I'll try to stay on board.
I love you, Orlando. I'm done.
Bart is meeting some people that are essentially advising him. It's the U.S. ambassador, and they're telling him what he's going to have to do. Tomorrow he's going to meet at the Parliament House at 3 p.m. He'll give his apology, and everything will be fixed. Bart only has one question. Do the toilets go backwards here?
No. To combat homesickness, we've installed a device that makes them swirl in the correct American way.
I love that line. The correct American way. That is such the American attitude all too often.
But because he says that makes Homer's little bit even funnier.
Oh, absolutely. First, we actually see this machine in process, which the toilet does start to flush the way that you would expect it to in the southern hemisphere until this ginormous contraption kicks in and starts vibrating and bumping the toilet bowl. I'm just imagining trying to sit on this thing. It would be like trying to shit in an earthquake as you were trying to do your business. And
that's the American way.
That's the American
Miles.
way. And it, you know what? It's actually a touching moment, as you pointed out, because Homer actually is weeping as he sings, "Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing." Very touching.
Does that work for you guys as Americans when you see that? Do you just think, yep, toilets are doing the right thing by us? Or is it a little bit more comical for you as well?
Oh, it's hilarious for me
It's
personally,
super
yeah. And I'm also, for what it's worth, other than this episode, I don't usually think which way is my water running because I just don't really care. Is the truth of the matter.
It just runs. God damn it!
It just goes down. We can all agree on that, right? Unless you're in outer space, yeah.
Wait, that's the way it's supposed to go?
Yeah, your house is wired weird, man. On the way back out of the embassy, I love Bart's line. He's like, "Hey, man, your sign's broken." Or, "Hey, G.I. Joe, your sign's broken. We're already in Australia," as it says, "Welcome to Australia." But the Marine explains, "No, sir, the embassy is actually considered American soil," which I love that they use this joke to kind of set up that parameter for later that they'll have a place to flee to. It's a really smart bit of writing. And then, of course, for now, Homer's just like, "Really? Look, boy, now I'm in Australia." And then we see him hopping back and forth, America, Australia, America, Australia, America, Australia.
I get it, Dad.
Until finally, once again, the Marine has had enough. He punches Homer in the face while he's on the American side, mind you, because here in America, we do not tolerate that kind of crap, sir.
Crap.
I love it. So the Simpsons are going to take advantage of this opportunity they have to visit the country. At least Marge and Lisa are. Lisa's a little bit disappointed because I think she wanted to see Bart's public embarrassment. But for now, they're going to look at some history of Australia, and we learned that it was in fact settled by British convicts. And immediately, again, it was actually a sculpture of snake that we see, or jailbird. But Marge is like, Lisa, watch your camera. And we see in the background, basically every Australian person at this museum is kind of lurking in a manner in which they're about to rob the Simpsons.
This was funny.
Paul, I don't understand why Australia didn't like this episode.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
Yeah, you guys are a bunch of sensitive dudes over there, I guess. Can handle a little poking and prodding, eh?
That's right. We have very thin skins, or at least our critics did in 1995.
Your animals aren't actually that deadly. It's just that your skin is so weak that it just penetrates right through.
Gold.
So, speaking of gold, we get into this wonderful interaction. In fact, the first Simpsons joke that Paul and I shared together was based off of this next segment right here. Bart is playing with a pocket knife in a bar where the Simpsons are attending, and a man walks up to him. You call that a knife? This is a knife.
That's a spoon. Oh, I guess you played Knifey Spoony before.
Dude, I can't tell you how overjoyed I was when I asked you to be on the show, and your response, I believe, was something along the lines of, sure, I'll play a little knifey spoony with you. I knew that this was going to be a good time from that moment so many months ago. And Homer is having an equally good moment because he finally gets to order one of those Australian beers he's heard about, which I love that every fucking beer in this episode is clearly supposed to look like Foster's, which I understand is actually kind of a joke in itself in Australia because it's not a good beer.
I'm glad you guys know this. I, as implied, have visited your fair shores just the once before, and there was all these places I went to where Foster's was like on tap or in a can for like exorbitant prices. And I just kept turning to whoever I was with and saying, that's us fucking with you, right? Because no one would pay any money for Foster's in Australia. So I'm really glad the Simpsons jumped on this and really re-emphasized it strongly.
Oh, yeah, they really ran with this bit, and it's such a funny time. I love, too, I have a spoiler a little bit for the end, but when they actually start, like, using the Foster's cans as weapons to assault the Simpsons on their way out, that's so good.
Is there a American import that you guys get over there that's, like, really popular?
Oh, yeah. Clearly, the worst beer in the world, if you are you guys, I would imagine your export, that's equivalent would be either Miller or Bud.
Yeah, those are very on par with each other. I've had all three of those, and Foster's is essentially like a Bud Light. It really isn't too far off. I think I like Foster's slightly better just because I didn't drink like my weight in it in college. Yeah, but other than that,
it's a little different. Yep, same thing. That for a while there, I thought Miller's was the greatest beer ever, and I'm like, hang on. This is like swill. And expensive.
They're on to us.
I think Foster's is very much like Corona to some extent, where it's just like, it's not a very good
big beer here as well.
It's got a great marketing campaign, and that's
exactly
what happened.
The same here.
Because, if you go to Mexico, I mean, you can get Corona in Mexico, but like you would have it, if you were to believe the marketing, you would believe that everybody in any tropical location, anywhere in Mexico, like just constantly drinks Corona on the beach by how they present their beer. And they do present with their commercials. I mean, hell, our slogan for the longest time was Foster's is Australian for beer.
Yeah, I remember that. And I was like, what? This makes...
Foster's Australian for beer.
Okay, damn you, Foster's. Well done. Well played, the marketing gurus there. I hope you got very well paid.
They're probably very, very wealthy people at this point, or somebody is because of their marketing for sure. But Homer gets his very big beer. That's exactly right. Homer gets his very big beer, and he's, it's pretty big, I guess. But Marge is just going to have a coffee.
Beer it is.
No, I said coffee.
Beer?
Coffee.
B-air?
C-O?
B-A? Sorry again for that accent.
Another just great bit. I love this concept too. That essentially, I think this is just more on the Foster's thing. They did such a good job with the marketing that we believe that Foster's is just what you drink there. Period. Morning, noon, and night.
That's great. It's very, very clever the way that somehow we are all drunken alcoholics and we only drink beer rather than coffee, which is maybe not that far from the truth.
I just love how this episode seems to be more of a reflection on how the rest of the world, and particularly the United States, views Australia as opposed to what it's actually like.
Yeah, and look at, I think
It's
there was
to play
some
on our stupidity, basically.
Well, but the writers said that they picked Australia, from what my little research was, that because they thought we were thick-skinned enough to take it, that they'd taken a lot of swipes in the first 5.5 seasons at America and American institutions, and, well, let's send them somewhere where the populace will be okay with this. And so they picked Australia, and I guess they were a little bit sort of taken aback by the reaction from at least the critics in Australia. I think the layperson, a la me, thought it was very, very funny, and we referenced it nonstop ever since.
Yeah, it's since you bring it up, I also had read a little bit about that idea, and that's exactly, according to the commentary too, even Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein talk about how when they did this episode, they thought, they really thought Australia was just going to absolutely love it. They had gotten a lot of support from Australians as fans of the show. They had already done almost 6 full seasons, or 5.5 full seasons at this point, of taking a lot of jabs at the American lifestyle and culture. So they're thinking, all right, we'll go overseas, and we have this fan base that seem to really like us. I bet they'll love if we make fun of them, since they love making fun of us so much. And a lot of people did have that reception, to be fair. There were fans of the show that definitely kind of was like, oh, I get it. They're, purposely getting information wrong, just making up words to, be silly and poke fun. But at the same time, they were overwhelmed with the amount of backlash that they received. At times, over 100 letters came in that was basically denouncing the show and demanding apology and things of that nature. It became quite the big stir for quite a while, actually.
I thought just recently it started turning around again, where it was more widely accepted, like not from fans, but maybe from the media sense. I thought that it had turned a corner here recently. I thought I read a few stories about that.
Well, I know that all the way back as early as even 99, the backlash had died down, because actually Fox Studios in Australia and Sydney specifically requested from the Simpsons staff to get some additional footage to do with this episode, as well as some additional voice work, because they actually made it part of an amusement park ride that it was kind of a... I was having a hard time finding a lot of information about exactly what it was, and even the commentators make fun of it in the Simpsons commentary for this episode, because they're like, wow, of all the episodes you could have picked, this is what you made a theme park ride out of? Like, what exactly are we doing? Watching the frogs populate? Watching Bart stand in front of Parliament. But
the tricycle ride.
They apparently were using a motion capture technology all the way back in the early 90s that would essentially put the audience that was in this motion simulator ride and actually put their faces and expressions and transform it into a moving Simpsons character as they're experiencing this event. So they did eventually come around and kind of embrace the fun of this episode.
Oh, well, I'm glad they got there in the end.
Yeah. Well, hey, they got there faster than this show is syndicated on television, so, I mean, it's fine. We are back with Bart at the Parliament House, which is actually, it looked like it's the Austrian Parliament House, and somebody with a red marker added the extra letters to turn Austria into Australia. I love those are some of my favorite jokes in The Simpsons, is the stuff that you see in the background like that, because that happens it happens twice, to be fair, but it happens so quickly. The first time I didn't actually see what it said. It took me a second to register what was happening, but it's a good joke. For now, however, it's time for Bart's public humiliation. The Parliament session has come to order with cooperation of the United States Department of State. They present today Bart Simpson. Bart approaches the microphone. He clears his throat. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to your country. And it's met with great applause. Everybody is absolutely thrilled. It seems like Bart's punishment has been had and everything is fair and square. In fact, Andy, the Prime Minister, even says, "You're free to go, Bart," right after your additional punishments.
Punishment?
Well, a mere apology would be a bit empty, eh? Let the booting begin.
Booting?
It's just a little kick in the bum. And we see a man come into the courtroom, or the parliament, excuse me, with a giant boot. I mean, and I mean very large boot. It looks like the boot that Mario can hop around in Mario 3, if that puts things in perspective. And Bart immediately is like, yo, not good. I'll go ahead and point out real quick that this booting is actually a parody of the real-life event in 1994 where one Michael Fay actually was 18 years old, and he committed some acts of vandalism on some cars while visiting Singapore. And he was actually sentenced to 6 lashes with a cane in a public forum, which for an American is a very severe, that seems completely inhumane and, way too over the line, but that was common practice in Singapore. He committed the crime, and now it was time for that cane to do some time on his back. Well, with some interference with the United States government petitioning to Singapore, they were able to get the sentence reduced from 6 lashes to 4, but Michael Fay did, in fact, as an American at 18 years old, have to take 4 whips with a cane for his crimes against public vandalism, essentially. And that grim fact is going to bring us out at the end of Act 2. We've got one more act to go. We'll be right back with our conclusion of Bart vs. Australia.
And now it's time for our favorite part of the show. What's that say? Ads and sponsorship. Ugh, this is going to be a real nightmare. Okay, what do you got for me? Patreon.com? What the hell is that? And they just give us money for it? Oh, if only we had that around in the 70s. Make sure you ask your mommies and daddies to send money to Best Darn Diddly at patreon.com so they can drive a dump truck full of money up to our houses. Uh-oh, I said the loud part quiet and the quiet part loud.
Things are looking grim for Bart as we're back in the parliament, and this man with the large boot walks up to him menacingly. Homer is getting quite upset. After all, this was some sort of ruse, and what kind of sick country would kick someone with a giant boot?
Mr. Simpson, shush. Disparaging the boot is a bootable offense. It's one of their proudest traditions.
He actually points up at the Australian flag, which is very similar to the actual Australian flag, only this version has a giant boot pointed at a man's bare ass.
That's exactly what it looks like.
And Homer, again, he's upset. You sold us out, Conover!
It's the way he says that, though. Like, it's so, like, action movie style. You sold us out, Conover! Like, it's just, I love the delivery of that line.
Yeah.
Well, and he's even got, like, the action sequence where he kind of kicks back to escape the person holding his hands back. And,
yeah.
He actually ends up grabbing and getting the boot himself, and he takes Andy, the Prime Minister, hostage, declaring, he'll do it! So help me God, I'll boot him!
Not Andy!
When will you Australians learn? In America, we stopped using corporal punishment, and things have never been better. The streets are safe. Old people strut confidently through their darkest alleys, and the weak and nerdy are admired for their computer programming abilities. So, like us, let your children run wild and free, because as the old saying goes, let your children run wild and free.
Way to bring it home, Homer.
What an impassioned speech.
Now, boy!
And as we pointed out to earlier, they kind of had this great setup where we know that there is a patch of United States Earth, essentially, the United States territory at the embassy, and they flee to try to get away. I actually really love this idea. Well, first of all, there's a couple of great things here. One, Bart and Homer, when they're running away, decide, like in the cartoons, they'll hop in a kangaroo's pouch and get away that way. And they immediately discover that it's a very mucousy membrane that's inside of there. And it doesn't work like it does in cartoons, apparently.
What about the boomerang throw right before that, too?
You mean the throwing stick that boomeranged back on us?
Oh, no, it's coming back this way.
That's a clever joke. I really think that's just a different level to some of the Australian references that, yeah, we're going to take the piss out of something that is very Australian and acknowledged the way it really should be, and yet then have you reference how it's not working, even in the way that, not that you think it should, but yeah, you know what I mean. There's such a, it's 3 layers deep, that joke, and I think it's better than a lot of humor that we get even nowadays, 23 years later.
Oh yeah, the level at which the Simpsons operate is always just so good, and when you see these moments where you get jokes like this, it really demonstrates just how much they can do with just a few short seconds of screen time. It's wonderful. Paul, let me ask, do you currently, was a boomerang a toy or a thing that you had in your home as an Australian person? Is this something that you actually use? Because I know when I visited, they were predominantly used as gift shop items for tourists.
There's no different. Exactly the same. And my daughter goes to a school which is very steeped in the Aboriginal culture, so they all got to bring home a little mini boomerang, and she was very keen to throw it at the park, and we did a little bit of that, and it didn't work, and so she lost interest. And yeah, but it's much more acknowledged now as part of the culture of our natural inhabitants, and a little bit, I guess, like your American Indian population. So yeah, we had them as kids. They didn't work. They still don't work today, but they are revered much more appropriately today than they were back in 1995.
So I had a boomerang when I was a kid that I won. It was like 100 tickets at Chuck E. Cheese, and my friends and I played with it all the time. And it was probably the most damn dangerous thing in the world because it was made of plastic, and we had hit the concrete with it so much that it just had these like giant chunks missing from it. So it had like sharp edges. We never once got actually close enough to try to catch it, but on the few attempts that it actually started coming back towards us, it almost became a moment where it's like, shit, maybe we should jump out of the way instead of try because it's probably going to hurt. However, I recently, it was probably about 6 months ago, I was visiting some friends, and he actually got an Arobi boomerang, which is a softer material. And Arobi frisbees are really, really solid flying disc, and they actually make some interesting like rings and other things that you can have a really good time with. Well, we spent a good chunk of an afternoon throwing this boomerang, trying to catch it, and I actually had this incredible moment for the first time in my life, going all the way back to when I was like 8 years old. I threw a boomerang. It immediately, you could just see it was on the perfect flight path. It came back to within about 10 feet of me, and I actually caught it in the air, and it changed my life forever. I will never be the same again. I'm swelling up a little just thinking about it right now. So boomerangs, they're a real thing, and they do actually work, but be careful because they'll fucking hurt if they're not made of soft material. I mean, they're originally a weapon, I do believe. Isn't that right?
Yes, they absolutely are. They're used to hunt animals and knock them down, incapacitate them so that the Aboriginal hunters could get to them and kill them for food. So yeah,
that's incredible. And now they're children's toys. How fun! That's basically what they're doing with guns here in the United States.
Oh shit! Oh, we got dark. We got dark over here.
That kind of talk gets you a bootin', Miles.
It's a bootable offense. Let's not disparage the boot. So. They do, in fact, flee to America. I love this transition we have because we get Lisa and Marge shopping at a souvenir shop, which is really funny because it's like the south of the hemisphere shop, I do believe is what it's called. But it's actually parodying a real-life store called the South of the Equator gift... Or, I'm sorry, that's the South of the Equator gift shop is the one in The Simpsons. The South of the Border shop is actually a really cheesy souvenir stand that is on the south side of the North Carolina and South Carolina border here in the United States. And they really do have a mascot named Pedro, and he really does have a love for bad puns. But what I love about this scene is when Homer and Bart actually run by, you hear first Bart running, Lisa, as he's like kind of sprinting by, and then immediately followed with Homer's Marge!
It's one of my favorite gags in Simpsons. I talked about it in Itchy and Scratchy Land, but I always remember this moment from this episode and absolutely love it.
Some great stereo effects in 1995 as well.
We should also point out that this is another reference to the fact that these creatures are overtaking the land of Australia. They're like kangaroos.
The Simpsons?
No, they're like kangaroos, but they're reptiles. I think they're called bullfrogs.
What? That's an old name. I'd have to call them Chazawazas.
Which is so fucking random.
I figured that was already taken by one of your many deadly animals there.
Amazingly not. Chazwazas, I've never heard of anything remotely like it, but geez, it made me laugh when I heard again. Watched it again the other night.
The Simpsons actually make it back to the embassy, but the embassy isn't ready to have them back. They're like, oh no, they've caused enough trouble. So they hit the door close button, which has a sign displaying proudly that this product was made in America. So, of course, it breaks.
That'll be your undoing, fools.
The gate gets stuck and malfunctions about a quarter or third of the way from being closed. So the Simpsons are able to sneak into the embassy, and then the guards manually close it and lock it, keeping the Australians on the outside looking in. Relations are reaching a lot of tension here, but they're trying to negotiate over the phone, and one of the men says that they're actually about to reach a breakthrough with the Aussies.
Then it's agreed. During the bargaining session, we each get 2 candy apples. All right, 1 candy and 1 caramel.
Oh, for the love of criminy, give me that. Look, I know Bart did something wrong, but he's my son, and I'm going to punish him myself. Our countries may have their differences, but as human beings, I think we can all agree there's no substitute for the discipline of a loving parent. He wants to talk to you.
Yellow? Mm-hmm. So we're in agreement. She won't be allowed near the phone again.
And this I actually have to give my favorite joke in the episode. I love the delivery of Phil Hartman on this. Just so fluid, and his response, we're in agreement. She won't be allowed on the phone again.
Well, into how smug Marge is when she hits the phone.
Yeah. She thought that she just solved all of the relation problems of the two countries in that one little burst, but not quite. Not quite. But they did, in fact, come to a compromise. They have argued them down to just a booting.
What?
Look, the Prime Minister just wants to kick you once, through the gate with a regular shoe. I believe it's a wingtip.
No deal. This is my son we're talking about. Sure, he's not perfect, but who is in this workaday world?
Mom, wait. It's time for me to bend over and receive my destiny.
Swell the music.
So Bart is ready to, I guess, take his punishment for his crime. And it's funny how much emotional weight they treat this scene with, because Lisa's even crying and it's like, thank you, Bart. I promise I won't make fun of you for this later. Homer's response is great too.
Show him what American butts are made of, son.
So Bart bends over in front of the gate. Andy, the Prime Minister, approaches, says, this is for the Commonwealth of Australia, and he gives a big wind-up, ready to give Bart quite the swift kick.
And you know, if he would have done a quick fire, he would have had
Bart's
him.
ass would have been kicked with a wingtip, absolutely, but he wanted to sell it for the cameras, Rich. He was trying to get that photo op moment, and it backfired, because Bart jumps right out of the way of his booth and declares, this is for the United States of America. He pulls down his pants, to which the words, don't tread on me, were very clearly written, and he starts wiggling his ass just inches out of reach of the Prime Minister's boot, which sends the Australians into a frenzy.
Well, and he's humming the Star-Spangled Banner while he's doing it, too.
Such a beautiful moment for American pride, absolutely. We see a helicopter swoop down into the embassy, and the Simpsons are on a mad dash to escape. And this is actually a parody of the real-life escape from the United States after the Vietnam War, as they were fleeing from the Saigon embassy. So there is cultural relevance to this as well.
Have we had the line where Lisa says, What I'm most impressed by, Bart, is how you managed to write so legibly on your own ass or whatever.
That's actually
that
what we're
gag.
getting to right now. It's
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. That was perfect timing. Marge is just...
She asked the perfect question.
Yeah, Marge is just really
It was a perfect
proud.
question.
She's glad she's okay. But, honey, I wish you would have chosen a more tasteful way to be patriotic. And that's when Lisa expresses just how impressed she is with her... How impressed she is with her brother's ability to write so legibly on his own butt. I got that out eventually. Hey, I was speaking slowly in Australian.
Oh, I'm so impressed you were able to wipe so legibly.
I didn't have my bidet handy.
Oh, that was perfect.
There's also this really random but very funny joke for some. I honestly I've watched this joke so many times now, and I laugh every time, and I don't know why I'm laughing. It cracks me up. But the two Marines are taking down the United States flag as this embassy is under siege. They fold it, and it looks like they're about to go through like a military folding of the flag, essentially. But instead, they both insert the ends of the flags into their mouth and start chomping down on it, Lady and the Tramp eating spaghetti style. It's very quick. It lasts for like 2 seconds, but it's just such a silly, silly thing, and it's so funny.
Bizarre.
Very bizarre. We do get a little bit more excitement because Homer's like, hey, do we get to land on an aircraft carrier?
No, sir. The closest vessel is the USS Walter Mondale. It's a laundry ship. They'll take you the rest of the way.
Poor Homer. No more excitement for him. But as the helicopter leaves, they notice as they look out the window that those frogs that have been just taking over the country are eating all of their crops. And the Simpsons just start laughing at this idea.
Well, that's what happens when you introduce a foreign species into an ecosystem that can't handle them.
And then I love this ending because it's such a bizarre. It's almost like a Twilight Zone style of shot where we see on the underside of the helicopter's landing gear there is a koala clutching in, and as we kind of zoom in, we get some somewhat eerie music, or foreboding might be a better word, and it zooms in all the way to the koala's eye. And that's where we cut. That's the end of our third act and the end of Bart vs. Australia. We get some nice didgeridoo music on the way out doing the Simpsons theme. And that is all for this week's Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Paul, is there anything else that you would like to add about Bart vs. Australia?
Only that it's been a pleasure to be here today to listen to you guys discuss it and relive it, revisit it with you guys. And I'm so honoured to have been invited to represent Australia for the one episode of The Simpsons, at least as far as I watched it through to, which is, sort of season 13, season 14. And really, really chuffed to be here. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for having me along for the ride.
Oh, man, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for working with the schedule and getting together so we could make this happen. This was a lot of fun, and you were absolutely the right man for the job. Thank you for representing Australia, the entire country. This essentially is what we are going to think of when we think Australia. We're thinking Paul from the Countdown Podcast.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Paul.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And go ahead real quick. We'll get to Rich. I know Richie's going to have some stuff to add, but while we're on it, go ahead and plug your show one more time. Let everybody know where they can find you and what they can expect from you.
Yeah, please give us a listen, give us a shout out. The Countdown Movie and TV Reviews. We're also on Podbean. We're at the Countdown PC on Twitter. And if you search us with the Countdown Podbean, you'll find us pretty much anywhere. We're part of a great network called Comic Confidential Radio. And yeah, some great shows there as well. And each week we get together, give each other a lot of shit. We have a lot more bad language than your show. And we have a lot of fun with just going down a list of whatever topic that we decide and reviewing usually the latest sort of movie review, but sometimes some classics and even sometimes some TV shows. We get back into TV a little bit more in the coming weeks and months.
It's a lot of fun. You guys have great chemistry, as Richie pointed out earlier. So definitely go and give their show a listen. Support these guys. And again, thank you so much for being here today, Paul. It was an absolute pleasure having you, my friend.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you, Richie. Absolutely. And thank you, listeners, for putting up with me today.
Richie, is there anything else that you want to add or talk about from you or that book of yours before we get out of here?
Yeah, how do you do a top 10 animal list for movies and not have the adventures of Milo and Otis? I can't even right now. I'm just
Okay. I can answer that. I can answer that on the spot because Milo and Otis died 17 times over between the two of them in the making of that film.
Oh no!
Oh
I
my
never
God!
knew that.
Whoa!
I'm exaggerating the 17, but those animals died a lot apparently in production, so I couldn't bring myself to put it on the list.
Again.
That's awful. Is that really a thing?
I think so. That's what I remember from my research way back in the day. I did not go and double check it because I have seen that one. I haven't seen Homeward Bound.
Homeward Bound is another one. Oh.
I've been told that I should not have been allowed to make that list without seeing Homeward Bound, but I had seen Milo and Otis, and I was like, what about this one? And my quick bit of research said a couple of the kittens and a couple of the puppies died making that movie. So I'm like, nope, not doing that because my co-host will tear me a new one.
In Benji the Hunted, a dog takes on a mountain lion and wins, and a bear.
Well, I need to see that one for sure.
But no, getting back to Bart versus Australia, I did want to point out that my book, The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family, actually had quite a bit about this one. I feel like they might be going loose line on this, but they point out that Bart's collect call to Bruno costs $900, the exact same amount the Springfield Gas Company bills the Simpsons after one of Bart's stunts detaches the family dryer and ignites the gas way back in Homer's Phobia. So I don't know why they pointed that out specifically. Maybe there's something with 900. I'm not sure, but I wanted to...
Do we know the exchange rate between dollars and dollary dues?
Not exactly. But if only we knew somebody to ask.
$900 dollary dues in 1995 language versus 2018 language would be somewhere in the order of $5 billion trillion.
You heard it here, folks.
That's scientifically accurate.
Heard it here first. The other thing the book wanted to point out is there is a motto on the commemorative Australian stamp that says 30 years of electricity. And then there was also...
I didn't notice that.
There was a sign on the American Embassy in Australia that read, U.S. Embassy, restroom for citizens only. So there's a bunch of stuff I feel like I missed in this episode that the book pointed out, which hasn't happened in a while. But other than that,
it's true.
It's just such a fun episode still, and it's honestly been a while since I've seen this particular episode. And usually I remember every little bit about it, but seeing all the quick little sight gags and whatnot and everything going on, you remember the major points, but you forget how much fun it actually is, even though you remember the episode fondly. So. And as Miles said, Paul, thank you so much for joining us on this. And one last time, I will apologize for all the Australian accents that I did.
Oh, please, not at all. Not at all. And I'm sure our Aussie listeners are all good with it too, because, yeah, unlike some of the critics that we have here, we're all pretty cool with being made fun of. We're just happy to appear in an American production, like when Independence Day happens and there's a shot of the Sydney Harbour Bridge or the Opera House. We're just like,
yay! That's awesome. Very cool. I only have one last thing to add, and that is just simply that, like many things in The Simpsons, this episode has actually gone on to become study material for a sociology course at the University of California, where it is used to, quote, examine issues of the production and reception of cultural objects, in this case, a satirical cartoon show. So I just think it's fun that this has gotten so much cultural impact. It's actually being used at universities, or at least at a university. Super cool time. I regret terribly that I was so cocky about how, I really know Stonecutters is going to be probably top of the list just a few short episodes ago, because it seems like every episode we've watched since, including this one, might just be a contender for that. Like you guys had mentioned, I have not watched this episode in some time, but revisiting it was an absolute treat. Absolutely loved what the parody that they were able to accomplish. And as an American, seeing The Simpsons roast ourselves so often, it was a lot of fun to see them take it to a different place in the world. And we know that this is just the first of many more to come. Well, I guess technically they did France back in season 1, but there's going to be a lot more both United States and world travel for The Simpsons in the future. This is just getting our toes wet, but I think it's a very strong start for that style of episode. Other than that, thank you again so much to each and every one of you for downloading and listening to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Make sure you follow theWizKid at theWiz_Kid23. Follow me at MrMostDaysOff and follow our show at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY. That works on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all those places. Make sure you do that right now. Paul, one more time, plug your stuff.
Countdown Movie and TV Reviews, myself and Wayne. Hit us up on Twitter at the Countdown PC or on Podbean, Countdown Movie and TV Reviews Podcast. Thanks again so much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Richie and I look forward to being back with you again next week when we're going to be reviewing the episode Homer versus Patty and Selma.
Don't forget to give us all your dollar dues on patreon.com
/bestdarndiddly. And until next time, be cromulent to each other.
Hi, it's Mike Reese. I've been writing for The Simpsons for 30 years. I ran the show in seasons 3 and 4. I created The Critic. And now I've written a book. It's called Springfield Confidential, and it is the first insider's look at The Simpsons. It's filled with secrets, scandals, and tales of censorship and celebrities. It's a great book. It's like a Simpsons episode. It's fast, it's smart, and it's packed with hundreds of jokes, some of them funny. Please buy Springfield Confidential. You can order it now on Amazon.com.